23LM Racing and Front Row have responded to NASCAR's response to the lawsuit, and Bubba Wallace will have a new crew chief for 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Hemrick's 2024 High Point paint scheme that we'll see this weekend at Martinsville. Scheme's alright in my opinion. I do like the colors on it. Cogs had some good ones. They've also had some bad ones as well. It's okay. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Bubba Wallace's 2024 Xfinity scheme that we'll see this Sunday at Martinsville. I absolutely love this paint scheme. I like the purple, I like the white. There's a lot of great things about it, and it's one of my favorite paint schemes I've seen so far this year. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Christopher Bell's 2025 Reims scheme that we'll see next year. This looks pretty good in my opinion. I do think they could have done a really solid job on the back of it though. I think there's some good things about it. And if you also notice there's a new logo for the Cup side of things, this does look alright. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack in 2025. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Bubba Wallace's 2024 Columbia Star Wars scheme that we'll see at Phoenix. This scheme is based on the dark side. This looks phenomenal. One of the best schemes I think so far this year in my opinion. It looks absolutely incredible. It's a great collaboration. It looks better than last year's Star Wars schemes in my opinion. This looks absolutely phenomenal, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the racetrack at Phoenix. It looks absolutely incredible, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Martinsville purse money. So every time you have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockets puts out the purse money for that event. And according to Bob, for the Cup race, it's $8,991,338. For the Xfinity race, it's $1,441,088. And for the truck race, it's $672,417. Some solid purse money for the Cup Series, obviously with the charters and all this stuff, they usually get the most money. Xfinity's got some okay money for the weekend, but not the greatest, and the Truck Series basically got pennies this weekend. Not the best for the Truck Series. Hopefully in the future we can see increased purses for trucks and Xfinity, but at least for the Cup Series, it's got some pretty solid and pretty good purse money, in my opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Spire Motorsports. As it was confirmed yesterday, the Spire Motorsports has the fastest four-tire pit stop, not just in Cup Series history, but in NASCAR history. This is done at Homestead Miami Speedway when they had an 8.29 second pit stop. For a four-tire pit stop, that is absolutely impressive. Now, Spire Motorsports does get a lot of their pit crews from Hendrick Motorsports, and historically, Hendrick Motorsports is one of the best teams when it comes to being on pit road. I think it's pretty wild to see that they continue to improve. Spire is becoming one of the best organizations in NASCAR at this point, and it's pretty crazy to see they continue to bring up new things and continue to be really great and getting new records for the team. Really awesome stuff, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Daytona 500. As reported by Dustin Albini and many reporters in the industry, that voting is underway for the grass design for the Daytona 500 for 2025. There's three options. There's an A, there's a B, and a C. If you want my opinion, C is the best option. You've got the Harley J. Earl trophy design look, in my opinion. That looks the best. It looks absolutely incredible, and I think that's the one they should go with. Now, will they choose that? It depends on, I think, what the fans want. So I think the fans are going to have a major role and major play on which one they end up using. But I really hope they end up using that one because, in my honest opinion, that is probably the best one they've got, and I think it does look really solid. I think that's the one they should use. Are they going to use that? We'll have to wait and see what happens, but I think that's the design they should use next year, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. As Kyle Busch pretty much confirmed this and basically said that he won the Wing Micro Championship for 2024. His son Brexton also won a pretty big championship, if I'm not mistaken, as well. Kyle Busch, even though it's been a frustrating year for him in 2024, it's good to see that Kyle Busch is able to go out there and win something before the end of the year. And good to see he's been winning some Wing Micro races. He's been, I believe, competing at Millbridge and other tracks across the country, if I'm not mistaken, and has been pretty solid throughout 2024 in that. Well, like I said, it's been a frustrating year for Kyle, and I know he's looking to get into 2025. I think it's really good to see that something did go his way, and it's good to see that Kyle Busch was able to win a championship in another area. Congratulations to him, and good to see that Kyle Busch was able to win something, because again, it's been a frustrating year for Kyle. Glad to see he was able to win something before the end of the year. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mason Maggio. As it was announced yesterday that Mason Maggio will drive the 53 for Joey Gase Motorsports this weekend at Martinsville. Mason Maggio has made select starts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and Truck Series throughout 2024. Has had some okay performances, but realistically it's not been the best performances in the world. But we have to remember the equipment that Mason Maggio is in is not the fastest equipment overall. And Mason sometimes can get the best out of this equipment. So realistically, I think top 30 should be the goal. I think top 35 is definitely realistic. But even if he can come out with a top 30 this weekend, that is going to be very, very impressive. I really hope he can run really well because I think Mason does have some talent. He has shown potential in the past. I really hope Mason can run well because I think it'd be really good for the team. We'll see what Mason can do with Joey Gase Motorsports. I think he's got a lot of potential. We'll see what he can do this weekend at Martinsville with Joey Gase Motorsports. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Logan Bearden. As it was confirmed today that Logan Bearden will drive the 74 for Mike Harman Racing this weekend at Martinsville. Logan Bearden's been working with AM Racing. He did drive the Finty car. We know Haley Deegan's no longer part of the team, but he's going to have a chance and opportunity with Mike Harman Racing this weekend. Now, Mike Harman Racing has actually shown some decent pace and speed over the course of the last couple weeks. I don't think anyone is going home this weekend as well. I think one of the other cars ended up withdrawing. So I do think there's a good chance that he'll be able to make it pretty easily. And Logan's someone who has outperformed the equipment he's been in the past. Well, he hasn't been great with AM Racing. AM Racing, let's be real and honest, has struggled in 2024. I know they're looking to get better, but like I said, they have really struggled throughout the 2024 campaign. So I really hope Logan can run well this weekend. It'd be good to see Mike Harman Racing just have a solid performance. We'll see how he ends up doing, and we'll see if he can run really strong and really well with the Mike Harman Racing group this weekend at Martinsville Speedway. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stephen Parsons. As it was announced yesterday that Stephen Parsons will drive the 44 for Nice Motorsports next weekend at Phoenix. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this will be the first time that Stephen Parsons has driven for Nice Motorsports in his NASCAR career, which is a really great opportunity. I think that Stephen Parsons is one of the more underrated drivers in NASCAR today. He's had some really strong runs with Henderson Motorsports. He's had some top 20 performances throughout the year, and Stephen is someone who can absolutely get the best out of the equipment. And I do think he's going to have a pretty strong run with the team this weekend. I do think he's got a chance next weekend, I think he's also driving this weekend, if I'm not mistaken, at Martinsville, so he's going to get more experience, which could help him. Now, if I'm Nice Motorsports, I'm looking for opportunities for drivers, and if he performs well enough, I would consider putting him in this truck full-time next year. So I think if he runs top 20 and runs really well, I think that'd be great to see. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to how he ends up performing, but I do think that he'll be very fast. I think he will be competitive, and I think we'll have a good chance and opportunity to get a top 20. Great opportunity for him, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Landon Lewis. As it was officially confirmed earlier today that Landon Lewis will drive the 16 for Tory Racing this weekend at Martinsville. I believe this will be either the first or second start for Landon Lewis in 2024. Now, originally Johnny Sauter was supposed to be behind the wheel of the number 16 truck, but we'll get to that in just a second on why he's not behind the wheel of the 16. But Landon Lewis is, of course, a development driver for Kevin Harvick Incorporated, I believe, and also works with Ron Hornaday's development group as well. Landon, extremely talented. I think he's won a Cars Tour race or two this year, and Landon's also been super competitive in the select ARCA race he ran as well. He nearly won the ARCA race at Bristol earlier this year. And I think Landon Lewis is going to have a really great opportunity here. He's someone who I think has a lot of potential to be potentially maybe a Cup Series champion in the future. And working Ron Hornaday Jr.'s group has been a major part in where he's shown his talent. And I think he is a super talented and a really great driver. Realistically, he doesn't have to worry about getting in because the last car truck that was in the field, Josh Ream, did withdraw. So I think he's got a really good chance and opportunity to be competitive. I expect him to be really strong this week, and a top 20 is very possible if they can bring the pace and speed. We've seen Eric Almirola drive this truck, of course. I could definitely see him having a really strong, great run. We'll see what he ends up doing this weekend at Martinsville Speedway. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Xfinity playoffs. As it was reported by Bob Pox and John Alwyn from Sports Business Journal that the Xfinity Series playoffs, as Steve Phelps reported, he says that the Xfinity playoffs have been up 15% from USA races when they were on USA for the NASCAR Xfinity Series. This is definitely really, really good to hear. Now, let's remember that the CW is, of course, broadcast network. So obviously when it's on a broadcast channel, you're going to get more people tuning in than people are tuning in the cable. But it also does need to be noted that, of course, this year we've seen some issues with the CW. Now, remember, this was announced as a last-minute thing. Originally, CW was not supposed to come in officially till 2025, but at the last minute, like 2 or 3 weeks prior to the playoffs beginning, they basically announced and sprung it on everybody at the last minute that the Xfinity Series would be moving over to the CW to finish out this year for the playoffs, including the final race at Bristol. And there have been some issues. There's no way to watch it on streaming, and that's something that I think they'll be able to get fixed going into 2025. I think that's one thing to work on. They also have not announced the talent for the CW going into 2025 at the moment, but I would have to imagine that Adam Alexander, who's been linked as a favorite to be there, will probably be the lead commentator for the Xfinity races on the CW next year. Again, it's good to see this for sure, that ratings have been up for the Xfinity Series, but I also do think that they need to kind of focus on getting the app up at this point so people can tune in on the app going into next year, which I think is something they'll continue to work on and try to improve on so they can be better at that. Nonetheless, this is really good news to hear, though, and glad to see that it continues to go up because, in my opinion, the Xfinity Series being out to more people is a really, really good thing. Glad to see at least there's some positive when it comes to this, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. As it was officially confirmed earlier this week that Shane Van Gisbergen will drive the 16 for Colleague Racing this weekend at Martinsville. This will be his final Cup Series start of 2024, as I believe either Ty Dillon or Derek Kraus will drive the 16 car next week at Phoenix. This car, of course, will be prepared by Trackhouse Racing. Now, Shane Van Gisbergen, this will also be the final time he does double duty. Remember, of course, he is moving up full-time to the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025 to drive a fully prepared Trackhouse car in the number 88 machine, but he's getting more experience at Martinsville. Ultimately, the goal for Shane Van Gisbergen is to just complete as many laps as possible. He's not going to be in a car that's going to be capable of winning. We've seen the Colleague cars really struggle, especially on short tracks. Yes, I know it's a Trackhouse prepared car, and I know that Ross Chastain ran really well at Bristol and has had some good runs on short tracks this year, but realistically, I think the goal for Shane is to just get as many laps as possible and run really, really competitive going into next year especially. I think Shane has shown a lot of potential. He's actually shown improvement on the ovals as well. He had a solid run at Vegas. Well, not a solid run, but he did get a top 30 finish, which is not that bad, all things considered. And I think that SVG in the Cup Series has shown some improvement. He also could have, of course, won the race at Watkins Glen not too long ago as well. So I think he's going to be very competitive, at least in some instances, but I think it's also going to be difficult to pass. Now, if it does become a tire race, we know SVG can save tires really well, and I do think he can run really well in that event as well. So we'll see how he ends up doing, but I think that Shane Van Gisbergen will struggle a little bit, but I'm glad to see he will be behind the wheel of the 16 car for Call, who have Acceptus Insurance as a sponsor. We'll see what he can do this weekend in the Cup Series race at Martinsville. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chip Ganassi Racing. As it was officially confirmed yesterday afternoon that Chip Ganassi Racing has announced their 2025 IndyCar lineup. There's going to be some changes. Scott Dixon will continue driving the number 9 car for Chip Ganassi in 2025. Alex Poole will continue driving the number 10 car for Chip Ganassi, and a change has happened as Kiffin Simpson will replace Linus Lundqvist in the number 8 car in 2025. Now, all 3 drivers, of course, drove for Chip Ganassi in 2024, with both Alex Poole and Scott Dixon competing for the championship, with Alex Poole picking up his 2nd consecutive championship, his 3rd IndyCar championship in a 4-year span. Scott Dixon has also been extremely competitive for many, many years and has been a championship contender for years on end. I look at Scott Dixon and Alex Poole, they're both going to be championship contenders. They're going to be having a really good chance and opportunity to win the championship. Kiffin Simpson, on the other hand, I think he was a weak link at Chip Ganassi this past year. He did have some flashes throughout the year, I will say, but generally struggled, and yet because of the sponsorship he has, he's getting the ride over Linus Lundqvist. Now, Linus Lundqvist, we don't know what he's doing currently at the moment for 2025, but it sounds like his future is currently uncertain at this moment, and he really does not know where he's going to be headed. There's potential of Rahal being actually, I don't think Rahal's available because Louis Foster's taking the seat. So there's potential of Juncos Hollinger being there, so that could also be a possibility, but we don't know at this point. But Kiffin Simpson, with the sponsorship he brings, that's why he's getting the seat, which is a little disappointing, but it's also not surprising in my opinion. So I really hope Kiffin can do a really good job, but I think he's going to be way behind his team as Scott Dixon and Alex Poole. Also with the charter stuff, you can't run more than 3 full-time entries or 3 charter entries, and if you've got sponsorship, you're probably going to get the seat. I really hope that Kiffin can run well, and we'll see how he ends up doing, but I also really hope that Linus Lundqvist can find a ride in IndyCar in 2025. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Miles Stanley. As it was confirmed yesterday that Miles Stanley will officially become the crew chief for Josh Berry at the Wood Brothers in 2025. Where I know, of course, that Josh Berry will be taking over the 21 for Harrison Burton, but we kind of wondering who was the crew chief going to be. And it was confirmed like a week or so ago that Jeremy Bowens would not be back with the organization next year. They're bringing Miles Stanley in. Now, if you know anything about Miles Stanley, he does have a little bit of crew chiefing experience. He actually crew chiefed for Robbie Gordon for Robbie Gordon Motorsports in the early 2010s, and has been working with Team Penske, I believe, for the last decade or so. And he did crew chief for Austin Cindric in select races in 2021 in the number 33 car. And we have to remember, that 33 car could have won a few races with Austin Cindric. Austin Cindric could have won Road America, had arguably the fastest car in the early portion of that event, and also could have won the Daytona 500 that year as well. He's also been working as one of the performance directors for Team Penske, and you look at their performance, they have won the last 2 consecutive championships. I do have a lot more confidence that they're bringing him in, especially with the veteran experience he brings, and he did show some competitiveness, basically being a substitute crew chief there. And I think Miles Stanley will bring some stuff to Josh Berry. You're going to have a veteran driver, of course, working with rookie crew chief, which I think will hurt Josh Berry a little bit, if that makes any sense. But I also think with Miles Stanley's experience working with Team Penske, and they're probably going to get a lot more help from Team Penske with Miles Stanley coming in and working with this team next year, I do believe that Josh Berry will have a solid year overall in 2025. Now, do I think he's going to be competing for wins? No, I don't really think he's going to be doing like what Matt DiBenedetto did, but I do think that Miles Stanley working with Josh will help him quite a bit. They're going to have to learn to work together very, very well, but I do think they've got a chance to work together very well going into next year. So we'll see how they end up performing in 2025 and working together next year, but I do think that this pairing has a lot of potential, and I could see a lot of good things coming the way for this organization, for the Wood Brothers, as I think they will absolutely improve their program in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dylan Capello. Now, we're going to talk about the Conor Jones stuff here in just a little bit, but one story that kind of went under the radar is the fact that Dylan Capello has also been suspended for the upcoming race at Martinsville Speedway. And the number 3018 for Front Row Motorsports has been handed a 10-point penalty. Now, this story kind of talked about on the channel, but NASCAR had actually confiscated the steering wheel from Front Row Motorsports this past week. Lane Riggs had to start at the rear of the field at Homestead, had a chance and opportunity to win, but they found some sort of ballast system that was not secure in the 38 truck in the R&D center, I believe, and therefore they have penalized the team 10 points. This is definitely really unfortunate for Front Row Motorsports when they've had a ton of basically momentum currently at this moment. Lane Riggs has been extremely strong in these playoffs. Lane has won 2 races so far this year, both going back-to-back at Milwaukee and Bristol, and has also shown some really big improvement throughout the year as his team has continued to grow. And I think Dylan Capello has been a big part of that growth as well. I think Dylan has done an excellent job being a first-year crew chief, because remember, he's a rookie crew chief, and he is super young as well. But I think a lot of people really rate the growth of Dylan Capello very, very highly, because I've seen that improvement and the growth from the team this year. And I think that him getting suspended, at least for Martinsville, is unfortunate, considering he's my pick to win for the Truck Series race later this evening. But at the same token, same time, I really hope he can do better and they can try to figure out these issues. This 38 team's also been disqualified at points for, I think, weights, if I'm not mistaken, or their windshield not being secure. So that's something they'll have to work on going into 2025, because we know Lane Riggs, of course, is coming back to Front Row next year. And I think Dylan Capello, once again, being the crew chief, even though Chris Lawson will be coming back into the Front Row organization more than likely in 2025. Nonetheless, really disappointing for how this team's been performing as of late, but I think Dylan Capello's done a great job, but it's a shame to see that this will overshadow how good they've been, because I think they've done a really good job this year, in recent months especially, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brennan Poole. As it was announced earlier today that Brennan Poole will be returning to Alpha Prime Racing in 2025, continuing to drive the number 44 car for Alpha Prime Racing. Brennan Poole has been one of the more underrated drivers so far in 2024. This absolutely makes a lot of sense. They already announced Ryan Ellis will not be back with the team next year, but I think Brennan Poole's done a really good job with the 44 team this year. Brennan Poole, I believe, has had 1 top 5, 2 top 10s, and has had a lot of finishes inside of the top 20. And he's actually 16th in the regular season standings. I believe he's really close to Josh Williams in the points in a Kaulig car. He's not that far off of Brandon Jones in a junior motorsports car, and at times has been kind of competitive competitive with guys like Shane Van Gisbergen, who's gotten 3 wins in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year. Brennan Poole, a lot of people have felt like is one of the more underrated drivers in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and is justifiably so. He has been exceptional this year at times, and I feel like he's been the best driver at Alpha Prime Racing throughout the 2024 campaign. And I was really worried going to year that this team was really going to struggle, but Brennan Poole has really stepped up this year and has done an excellent job throughout 2024. And I realistically believe that he is going to only get better next year as this team looks to continue to improve. The goal for Brennan Poole, in my opinion, going into 2025 is 1, improve on your position in the points and compete for an Xfinity Series playoff spot. I think it's going to be tough, though, because you got a lot of really good talent coming in. You've got, of course, Conor coming in full-time. You've got Nick Sanchez moving up. Christian Eck is moving up. Yes, you're not going to have Shane Van Gisbergen and Riley Hurst most likely, and Cole Custer and AJ Allmendinger, but you're going to have a lot of really good young talent moving up to the series next year, which I think will hurt them quite a bit. But I think that Brennan Poole's done a really good job this year. He's been very excellent at times, and I think he's done a very solid job performing, and I'm glad to see that he's back with the teams he absolutely deserves to be back with this organization, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about iRacing. Now, iRacing released their second dev diary going into some very interesting stuff around NASCAR 25. We already know that NASCAR 25 is expected to come out in the 4th quarter of 2025, but we don't have an official date currently at the moment. There was some very exciting and very interesting stuff in this dev diary. The graphics look really good in my opinion, especially for a game in 2025 and 24 especially. It does look really, really good. I think there's a lot of hype around this game. There's been a lot of excitement. There's likely going to be multiple series in this game. The Cup Series, the Xfinity Series is expected to be in the game as well, and the Truck Series will likely also be in this game as they look to build up this career mode. What I think a lot of people like myself are really hoping for is a game that is very good. We don't want a complete bare bones game per se, but we want the game to be functionable. The big problem with NASCAR 21 Ignition is a game was just not functionable. It performed very, very badly, and unfortunately the company we found out was very, very scandalous and kind of fraudulent as well with a lot of stuff they were doing behind the scenes. iRacing does have a very good track record with a lot of things they've been doing, but I would say you have the World of Outlaws game, which a lot of people really, really loved, and a lot of people that love the World of Outlaws game from what they've said are really going to enjoy this game, which gets me really excited and really intrigued as well. For me, I'm hoping this game is good enough and satisfactory enough, so I do think the fans of the games as well, they want a game to be good enough so the fans can be very, very happy. And again, I hope it's a really, really good game because I think for fans, the game needs to be really, really good. And hopefully it can be up to the standards of some of the other games from the old days like EA. We shouldn't have to go back 20 years ago to play a great game. We should be playing a really good game now. So I'm hoping with iRacing, we can see a really, really good game. And I think iRacing has that potential capabilities. And I'm hoping with these dev diaries coming out, we should also, of course, be getting a trailer really soon. I hope the trailer can be good and give us some hope for the future, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Elliott. Now, Chase Elliott was interviewed earlier today by Matt Weaver from Sports in the short track scene as well. And basically, Matt Weaver had asked a question to Chase Elliott about something he had said a couple months ago about him not wanting to be part of NASCAR's Netflix show, NASCAR Full Speed. And Chase Elliott, once again, was asked about being part of that show. And Chase Elliott basically said no, he is not planning to be part of Full Speed for season number 2. Now, Chase Elliott, of course, is not part of season 1 of Full Speed because, unfortunately, he was not in the playoffs. But unlike 2023, he got in the playoffs this year in 2024 with the win and being one of the most consistent drivers. Now, Chase Elliott is someone, it's no secret, does not like to show a lot of his private life. And there's more power to him. Chase Elliott has every right to do what he wants to do. But in my opinion, when it comes to Chase Elliott, especially when you are the most popular driver in the sport, you want to be out there trying to grow the sport. And I feel like for Chase Elliott, the fact he doesn't really want to grow the sport is really, really concerning in my opinion. And I feel like that there's some drivers in the sport who want to grow it, like a Bubba Wallace perhaps, or even a Kyle Larson in some instances. Yes, Kyle Larson, of course, focused on racing, but of course, Kyle Larson, he's one of the most popular drivers in the world when it comes to motorsports as a whole. And Kyle Larson's out there doing some things. Denny Hamlin wants to grow the sport in big ways. I've seen Chris Rebel being more outspoken than a guy like Chase Elliott. I feel like when you are the most popular driver in the sport, it is your responsibility to try to help to grow the sport. And I feel like Chase Elliott just isn't doing that, in my opinion. And to me, that is extremely concerning and a little bit heartbreaking in a sense, too, that Chase doesn't, in a sense, want to help grow the sport. Because I think that is so really important right now, is for him to grow the sport right now. Chase Elliott needs to be out there. He needs to be doing certain things. And Chase is really good with the fans. I think a lot of people that know Chase Elliott and have worked with Chase Elliott know that he is very, very good with the fans. And I think doing some stuff like going on Fortnite, doing that stuff with Nick at 30 back not too long ago, I think that's really, really big. But I think for Chase Elliott not being part of the Netflix documentary is a little bit concerning that he doesn't want to be part of it, and I wish he decided to change his mind and be part of it, but I'm also not the most shocked and surprised to see this. It's disappointing, but it's not surprising in my opinion. I wish he was part of the show, but am I really shocked he's not wanting to be part of the show? No, I'm not really surprised in my opinion, because I think that he wants to be like a private person. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think being part of a show like this should be the way to go, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jesse Love. As it was confirmed earlier today that Jesse Love will be returning to Richard Childress Racing in 2025, continuing to drive the number 2 car. It was also confirmed earlier today as well that Whelen Engineering will be back with the organization once again in 2025. I did a video talking about this and covering this on the channel earlier today, but this is a really good decision from Richard Childress Racing. Jesse Love has been with the team for the first year, and going into 2024, my expectations were very low for Jesse Love. I wasn't sure how he was going to do because he didn't do really that great in the Select Truck Series race that he ran in 2024, and I was 23 with Tricon, and I was very worried that him going to RCR that he was going to struggle. He's proven me wrong this year. He's done a really good job with RCR this year. At times has performed Austin Hill on the racetrack, and he got a win. Not many drivers can say that they've done that as a rookie in recent years in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Yes, Shane Van Gisbergen has gotten 3 wins this year, but SVG got eliminated in the round of 12. And of course, Hailie Deegan, they got rid of her, and of course, she did not make the playoffs this year. But Jesse Love, in my opinion, has done a very solid job in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and I think he's going to continue doing great things for sure in 2025. Now, what are my realistic expectations for Jesse Love going into 2025? The ultimate goal, in my opinion, is once again to win a race. If he can win a race like he did this year at Talladega, especially with how fast that 2 car has been at super speedways this year, I could see him definitely getting it done. But he needs to try to improve on what he did in 2024. Jesse Love's had multiple top 5s, quite a few top 10s this year, and in my opinion, should be trying to aim to get to the championship 4. But the Xfinity field is going to be very stacked next year. You're going to have Conor Zilic coming in. You're going to have Carson Quaffle coming in next year with Junior Motorsports. You've, of course, got Sam Mayer and Sheldon Creed moving over to the Haas factory team. Yes, you're not going to have Cole Custer or Riley Herbst next year. But you're going to have Nick Sanchez replacing Parker Kligerman. You've got Christian Eckes coming up. You've got Harrison Burr moving back down to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. You've got a really stacked NASCAR Xfinity Series field going into 2025. But I think that we've seen improvement from this organization on the Xfinity side recently, and Jesse Love has shown some really good pace and speed throughout this year. And I think about his future too. We don't know how long Kyle Busch is going to be staying in RCR past 2025. We do think Kyle Busch is going back to the organization next year, but we're really unsure what the future will be for Kyle Busch past 2025, considering the fact there were even rumors going around that Kyle Busch could leave the team at the end of even this year, even though he had confirmed it back in June that he was going to be back. I think there's a really good chance and possibly that if either Austin Dillon retires or, of course, Kyle Busch leaves the team, I could definitely see Kyle Busch moving away and giving the ride to Jesse Love. Jesse Love, and also at that point in 2026, he will only be 22 years old. So he's going to be super, super young. And I think he's shown so much potential, and I think he's got a lot of potential to be a NASCAR Cup Series champion one day. He has shown that capability and possibility, and I think he's done a really great and awesome job in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year. We'll have to wait and see in regards to that what happens to Jesse Love's future past this season, but I think he's done a really great job, and I'm really glad to see he'll be coming back to RCR. So I think he's done a really great and awesome job throughout 2024. In my honest opinion, I think he's done a really solid job throughout this campaign. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Hemric. Now, we know that Daniel Hemric, of course, will not be returning to Kaulig Racing in 2025. Ty Dillon, of course, will be taking that seat going into next year. But a lot of people like myself have been kind of wondering where Daniel Hemric could be headed in 2025. Well, it was reported by NASCAR Rumor Nostalgia earlier today that Daniel Hemric's name has been linked to a Truck Series organization for 2025. It sounds like he could be headed to McAnally-Hilgeman Racing in the Craftsman Truck Series in 2025. And continuing on with that article, it does sound like there's a potential possibility that he could also be part-time driving for NASCAR in 2025. In the Cup Series, as well as a note that they could be looking to kind of try to figure out what the budget is and try to see if they can run a Cup Series team in 2025. Now, I've heard the rumors also about Hemric going back down to the Truck Series to drive the number 19 truck. Now, the number 19 truck will have a new crew chief next year. We'll get that here in just a little bit. But the 19 truck for McAnally-Hilgeman Racing has been extremely competitive in 2024 and even 2023 as well. In the last 2 years combined, Christian Eckes has won a combined 7 races and is very likely to make the championship 4 next year. So if he's getting behind the wheel truly of this truck next year, Daniel Hemric is going to have a lot of shoes to fill. And they're going to need someone to come in there that could be up to the par of Corey Heim. We know Corey Heim has been exceptional, but we are also expecting that Corey Heim, while there are rumors about him maybe going to Legacy this in recent weeks, I don't think that he's going there next year. I think he'll be staying in the Truck Series. So I think they're going to have to figure out if they want to beat him. Now, of course, drivers like Lane Braze and Kane Honeycutt, I do expect to be super competitive against Corey Heim next year. But someone's going to have to take over the 19 truck. Now, I have also heard Zane Smith is a backup plan for this team going into next year, which is certainly a possibility. But I do think that Daniel Hemric going to McAnally-Hilgeman would be a very interesting move. And Daniel Hemric would not need to bring as much sponsorship and funding as he had to bring to a team like Kaulig Racing. And I think Hemric is a solid driver. Yes, he's never won a Craftsman Truck Series race, but I go back to the mid-2010s when he drove for teams like NTS Motorsports and drove for Brad Keselowski Racing. He was extremely competitive in the mid-2010s and could have won a few races during that time for NTS and, of course, for the organization like Brad Keselowski Racing. And I think Hemric is someone that could get the best out of equipment. And, of course, he does have an Xfinity Series championship. And people don't think that Hemric's a good driver because he hasn't won a lot of races. But I think that Daniel Hemric is a solid driver. I completely disagree with people saying he's a bad driver because he is not a bad driver. He is someone that has shown a lot of potential over the years. He's someone that a lot of people thought could be a winner in the Cup Series if he got the right opportunity. And he probably should have won a few Xfinity Series races with teams like Richard Childress Racing. I think he is overall a very, very good driver. So we'll just have to wait and see if this does end up coming true. But the fact that it's getting reported out there multiple times tells me it's very likely at this point. The Truck Series needs to have more competition. And I think Hemric being a former Cup driver at this point, I think he'll do a really good job if he truly does end up at McAnally-Hilgeman Racing in 2025. We'll have to wait and see if this ends up coming true for next year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chandler Smith and Ryan Truex. Now, earlier today, people from Front Stretch wrote a very interesting article in regards to Chandler Smith and Ryan Truex, where they basically write that both Chandler Smith and Ryan Truex should be racing in 2025 and have earned the right and opportunity to be full-time in 2025. It is no secret that Chandler Smith and Ryan Truex do not have rights currently at the moment for 2025. Let's begin with Ryan Truex. Now, Ryan Truex is very likely going to be back with Joe Gibbs Racing, at least on a part-time basis, in 2025, as Martin Truex Jr., of course, will likely also be part-time with JGR and Xfinity. He has confirmed he'll be racing at Rockingham Speedway during Easter break, and we should be seeing him run that race next year. But with Martin Truex Jr. sticking around and being an ambassador for JGR, I think Ryan Truex coming back to the team is a no-brainer. Now, I think he should be full-time in Xfinity competition. Ryan Truex is a very underrated driver. He has gotten 2 wins this year, and he's kind of like Martin Truex Jr., where the older he gets, the better he becomes as a driver. If he was full-time in this series next year, I think he would legitimately be a championship threat and a championship contender. And I think he would absolutely be a massive threat. And the problem for Ryan Truex is, unlike other drivers that are going into those rides for Joe Gibbs Racing, like Taylor Gray and William Salch and Brandon Jones, he doesn't bring a big paycheck. And it's disappointing that a sponsor isn't willing to work with him. Now, he did say this, I think, speaking to Eric E7 and Brennan Poole on their podcast Power Hour. He's trying to find sponsorship to compete. We don't know what he's doing yet, but I think he should be full-time. And then you've got Chandler Smith. Chandler Smith is expected to not be back with Joe Gibbs Racing next year, and he may even be out of NASCAR completely altogether in 2025. If this ends up coming true, and he's not full-time next year in Xfinity, that is going to be a major shame. But that's a big problem with the NASCAR Xfinity Series right now and the Truck Series too, is you need to bring a lot of funding in sponsorship. Now, it's also no secret that unfortunately they don't have the biggest budget out there anymore. Chandler Smith does. He's lost a lot of funding that he had before. But Chandler is got a chance to win the championship this year. Going into tomorrow's race for the Xfinity Series, he's going to have a really good chance to win. He's been super competitive on short tracks this year and has been super competitive throughout the 2024 campaign. I think he's had like 9 top 10 finishes the last 11 or 12 races, and has had a chance to win a few races and probably should have had a few more wins. The problem for the Xfinity Series right now is you got to bring a big budget and a lot of money, and unfortunately, like I said, they're not bringing as much money to the table at the moment for Chandler Smith. But I really think that both these guys should be competing. And you think about a driver like Eric Almirola. We don't know what he's doing yet for 2025, and yet, in my opinion, him being full-time would be another great option. Same with Corey Heim, though. We think Corey Heim, of course, is going back to the Truck Series next year. So I really hope for these guys' sake they can find rides for next year if they don't go back. I think for Chandler, he could go to, if let's just say RFK Racing would ever open up an Xfinity program, because they're going to be expanding their Cup Series program next year with Ryan Preece being the driver, though that has not been confirmed at this point, though we are expecting that to happen. I think it'd be really good if that ended up happening for sure for him to go there. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that, and we'll see what happens in regards to the future of these drivers going into the 2025 campaign. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Conor Jones. Now, I did a video covering this on the channel yesterday, but NASCAR officially announced yesterday that Conor Jones has been suspended for today's NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Martinsville. Now, why was Conor Jones suspended? Let's get back to the story on Saturday. So, during the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race, about 70 laps into the event, coming close to the end of the Truck Series race, Conor Jones and Matt Mills were getting into it a little bit. Matt Mills put a little bit of block on Conor Jones going into turn number 3, and Conor Jones just completely sent it into turn number 3 and forced Matt Mills and crashed him hard into the outside wall. Conor Jones then went on a ramp, and Matt Mills basically went, unfortunately, to the hospital after the crash. He got out of the truck, but unfortunately ended up going to the hospital because of smoke inhalation. Now, Matt Mills did get released from the hospital, I believe, on Monday or Tuesday, and is cleared to race this weekend at Martinsville Speedway. Meanwhile, Conor Jones, after the wreck had happened, went on a tirade and went on a rant, basically saying he's tired of it and not happy with how everything had ended up happening. Then he wrote a little bit of an apology that looked AI generated, in my opinion, and it didn't look very, very genuine by Conor Jones, considering he was blowing off the media basically before getting answer questions. Now, NASCAR did suspend him for this weekend at Martinsville. Now, a lot of people are probably saying that Conor Jones should have been suspended for longer, and I actually kind of agree. I think it's good that NASCAR is stepping in. They did hand him a 2-lap penalty throughout the race at Homestead, but it was not enough at the time. And I think them suspending Conor Jones is sending a clear message. If you know anything about Conor Jones, you probably know that Conor Jones is a driver that has a little bit of a reputation for intentionally wrecking drivers and getting into confrontations with other drivers and giving up on his team. Conor's been a driver that I've seen in the Cars Tour do a lot of things. He's wrecked people for the win in late models in the Cars Tour. Apparently, Raj Group kind of called him out as well about doing stuff at Dominion and other tracks across the country as well. Conor Jones is only in the Truck Series because of the money his dad gets from Jones Utility. If he wasn't funded by his dad, he probably wouldn't be in the truck he's been in. And the problem for Conor Jones, too, is Conor Jones is a driver, in my opinion, that doesn't have the talent to back it up. In 13 Truck Series starts this year, Conor Jones has 0 top 10 finishes. Meanwhile, Luke Fenhaus, who's driven this same truck, has had 2 top 10 finishes in 3 starts. Now, the driver who will replace Connor Jones for this weekend is Johnny Sauter, who originally was in the 16 truck. He'll take over the number 66 truck for this weekend at Martinsville, which I think is very interesting, to be honest. But when I think of the Connor Jones stuff, this is definitely the right call by NASCAR to suspend him at least for 1 week. However, if I was the one that was officiating this stuff, Connor Jones should have been suspended for multiple weeks. I think he should have been suspended for the rest of this year to really get a message across. Connor Jones, in my opinion, has had a terrible reputation in this sport, in NASCAR, in motorsports across the world. And I think NASCAR stepping up here to do something about it is the right decision. They gave a 2-lap penalty to Lane Riggs, but Lane Riggs, the driver that hasn't had that kind of reputation of intentionally wrecking. So it's like it is what it is, a 2-lap penalty. I think that's fair. But Connor Jones has a bad reputation. But also NASCAR has been very consistent with intentional wrecks. Last year, Chase Elliott got a 1-race suspension for right rear Denny Hamlin down the straightaway at the Coke 600. That was the right call. Then 2 years ago at Vegas, Bubba Wallace right rear Kyle Larson down the straightaway. That was the right call. And then you go back to 2011 when Kyle Busch intentionally wrecked Ron Hornaday Jr. Kyle Busch got suspended for the rest of the weekend and nearly lost his sponsorship from M&M's. A lot of people compare Connor Jones' situation to Carson Hocevar. And yeah, I think the Carson Hocevar did a lot of dumb things on the racetrack. But the problem is, the difference between here is that Carson Hocevar has the talent to back it up. Carson Hocevar won 4 Truck Series races in 2023. And this past week in the Cup race at Homestead, he was competing up front for the potential win at one point in this race. Was one of the few non-playoff guys that kept up with the playoff guys. So I think that comparison's fair, but Carson Hocevar has talent to back it up. Connor Jones doesn't. And I think that he has a lot of growing up to do as a driver. And if he's going to be part of the sport long term, he needs to grow up very, very quickly. Otherwise, he's going to be out of the sport faster than he can think of. I really hope he can clean this stuff up going forward. This is a wake-up call, in my opinion. He's been sent to the hauler 3 times. This is a major wake-up call for him, and he needs to really get it together going forward, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Bootie Barker and Charles Deneke. As it was confirmed yesterday that Bootie Barker will not crew chief for Bubba Wallace in 2025. Bubba Wallace will have a new crew chief going to 2025, which we'll get to here in just a second. But this is definitely really, really shocking. Now, NASCAR Nostalgia had put out this rumor, and they didn't even believe that this rumor was going to come to fruition. But literally 2 hours after this came out, we got the news of Bootie Barker. Now, Bootie Barker is still going to remain inside the organization of 2311 Racing, will move to more of a leadership role in the team and move to a higher up position. Bubba Wallace's new crew chief for 2025 is going to be Charles Deneke. Charles Deneke has been the crew chief for Christian Eckes for the last 2 years. I've already talked about it, but Christian Eckes, the crew chief, and Charles Deneke have really worked together very well this year and last year as well. And combined in the last 2 years, there have been 7 wins for both pairing, and there's a really good chance and opportunity that Christian Eckes could win the championship if he makes it to Phoenix after the Craftsman Truck Series race later tonight. Now, going and starting with Bootie Barker, I definitely am a little bit disappointed to see he's no longer working with Bubba, but let's be real and honest, I think this pairing's time to work together has come to an end. You look throughout the last couple of years. In 2021, Bootie Barker joined up after a disaster start with Mike Wheeler, and in 2021, Bubba Wallace was won at Talladega, and they had a solid end to 2021. Then 2022, they showed improvement. They got a win at Kansas, and actually, while they didn't make the playoffs, the 45 car that he drove for made the owner's playoffs, and Bubba showed some really good speed near the end of the year. And then 2023 was the year they really took the step forward. They made the playoffs and then got to the round of 12. But throughout the last couple of years, I've noticed this too, that Bubba Wallace will always qualify extremely well. A lot of times this year, that 23 car has qualified inside of the top 10. However, throughout the race, it seems like some of the adjustments they make on the car aren't great. They don't really keep up with the racetrack and unfortunately lose a ton of ground. For instance, this past weekend at Homestead Miami Speedway, Bubba Wallace finished second in Stage 1 to Tyler Reddick and was competing up front for the lead in the early portion of the race. They finished 18th at the end of the day. Now, it probably was pit strategy that caused some of that. It was probably other things that unfortunately affected, bad pit stops, whatever it is. But I think that Bootie Barker, while he's a solid crew chief, he's not the crew chief that's really going to take the next step forward. But I am glad to see Bootie Barker is going to be still part of this team because Bubba Wallace and Bootie have worked together well this year. They've had the best year statistically of his Cup Series career. He's had 7 top 5s, 14 top 10s. If people think that Bubba Wallace is a problem at 20-11, I think you got to look in the mirror because, in my opinion, Bubba Wallace has done a really solid job with 20-11. Yes, Tyler Reddick has outperformed him. There's no denying that. But Tyler Reddick, let's be real, is a much better driver than Bubba Wallace on the objective scale. As for the new crew chief coming in, Charles Deneke. Charles Deneke, like I said, is a very solid crew chief. And some people are definitely a little bit concerned that are Bubba Wallace fans. I would be a little concerned if we haven't seen this transition before. Let's go to one crew chief example. Chris Lawson. Chris Lawson last year was the crew chief for Zane Smith at Front Row. They really gelled together very well. In 2022, Chris Lawson and Zane Smith won the championship. In 2023, while they did not make the championship 4, they still won 2 or 3 races that year, and Zane Smith was extremely competitive. He moved up to the Cup Series to be the crew chief for the number 51 team, and that 51 car has performed a lot better with Chris Lawson being the crew chief. Corey LaJoie, the last 4 or 5 weeks, has shown some really solid pace and speed at times, and then, of course, with Justin Haley, had some really strong performances before Haley, of course, moved over to Spire. I think that Chris Lawson has been a major reason for their improvement throughout 2024. There's also even rumors he might be going to Front Row next year, so that could be a potential possibility where he can be working with Todd Gillen once again. The other prime example is Rudy Fugle. Rudy Fugle worked with William Byron in the Craftsman Truck Series in 2016. They won 6 or 7 races that year. Unfortunately, Byron didn't make the championship 4, but William Byron had a great year. The first year they worked together in 2021 in Cup, William Byron wins a race and goes in to makes the round of 12. And then 2022 made the round of 8, and William Byron has a really good chance of getting back into championship 4 for the second year in a row, as he's won 3 races so far this year. That pairing has gelled together very well. So my assignment for Charles Deneke coming in is really, really high. I think Charles Deneke is someone who really could coach Bubba a little bit more, and I think he's going to be able to keep up with the racetrack a little bit better than Booty Barker has done. It all sounds like Freddie Kraft may not be part of this team anymore, which that would be very disappointing if that was the case. But I think that Charles Deneke coming in is going to be a major asset for the team, and I think like I said, he has done a really good job working with Christian Eckes. Of course, I thought maybe he'd go to college. Obviously, that's not happening, but I think working with Bubba Wallace next year for Charles Deneke, he's going to have some big shoes to fill. Anytime we're going to drive like Bubba Wallace, there's a lot of fans and a lot of people that kind of put a lot of pressure on him that I think is undeserved, in my opinion. I think Charles Deneke is going to be looked at under a microscope, unfortunately, going into 2025. But I think that there's any crew chief out there that has deserved a chance and opportunity to move up, I think it's Charles Deneke. And I think he's going to do a really good job working with Bubba. And I'm really excited to see what these two can do, because I think that this pairing is going to gel very well together next year. And I expect both of them to work very well together going into 2025. And I think Bubba will only end up getting better and not getting worse in 2025, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we got more updates in regards to the lawsuit between 20-11, Front Row, and NASCAR. Let's go to a little bit of a backstory. About a month ago, it was announced that 20-11 Racing and Front Row Motorsports would be suing NASCAR for antitrust stuff. NASCAR then, of course, did respond, but of course, Jeffrey Kessler, who is the lawyer for the team side of things, who's also won some cases in court, he's put out his side of the argument as well. About a week ago, it was confirmed that NASCAR and 2011 Front Row actually agreed to redact some of the information that they received. But the NASCAR, they also responded on their side of things and kind of proved some of the things on their side. And now 20-11 Racing and Front Row Motorsports, they have now responded to NASCAR once again yesterday. They said that open team agreement also requires them to waive rights to pursue lawsuit when it comes to antitrust suit. That is definitely very, very interesting. I did not know in the charter agreement that if you're an open team, that even if you're an open team and not signing the charter agreement, you have to sign a requirement that you cannot sue NASCAR. Apparently, this antitrust stuff came in not too long ago, it sounds like, and I find that to be very interesting, which it sounds like that could really hurt them going forward. And they also argue that the injunction won't hurt NASCAR. They said they could still go on with the status quo with the 36 teams that are currently chartered or teams that could be chartered going into next year, but they say the injunction will not hurt them. And I can't disagree with the teams on that either. I really don't think it'll hurt NASCAR. Now, obviously, NASCAR has said that they're planning to revoke 2311 Racing and Front Row's 4 charters they have at the moment right now, cutting it down from 36 to 32. They have said the open teams are expected to make a lot more money going into next year as well, and the teams that signed a charter agreement are going to end up getting a little bit more of that money as well, but they're basically going to try to take it away at the end of the year, unless, of course, the teams do agree, which they have until the end of the year to kind of agree on that deal. Now, there was an update on it tonight as well, that the motion for expedited discovery has been denied. The teams, Front Row Motorsports in 2311, everyone part of that team, wanted all 6 of the high figures in NASCAR: Steve Phelps, Steve O'Donnell, Lisa France Kennedy, Jim France, Ben Kennedy, and everyone part of the group. They wanted them to show all the documents from the 2016 charter agreement and also the upcoming 2025 charter agreement as well. But the courts actually kind of sided with NASCAR by saying that there would not have been enough time to provide all the evidence, which I do argue they probably would have been a way to look at a folder and maybe find some of the documents and stuff. But I also don't disagree. It probably would have taken a long time to find every single piece of document going into this charter deal. Now, this does not mean the injunction has been denied or granted at this time. Remember, the injunction is expected to happen. The court case for the injunction, preliminary injunction case, will take place on November 4th. On Monday, it originally was scheduled, I think, for today, October 31st, when I'm filming this, or October the 30th yesterday. But obviously, of course, that did not end up happening, and they got that delayed November 4th because of the hurricane stuff going on at this moment. Now, Steve Phelps also did a little bit of a seminar earlier today, speaking, I think, about the end of the year, and also kind of spoke on the lawsuit situation as well. He says they wish they weren't in this place. They wish that they had signed the charter agreement. They had basically told the teams to sign the agreement, which, by the way, NASCAR kind of coerced and forced. RCR said that. I think a couple other teams kind of said that. Well, teams like Trackhouse, who are expanding next year with SVG, Roush, and Sports being the drivers next year, they kind of basically said that as well. And then you think basically said they weren't forced, which I don't think is entirely true. I think the fact that they sent a document at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time or close 7 Eastern and only giving them about 6 hours to read it, that is definitely very concerning to see that NASCAR kind of forced the team's hand there a little bit. But Steve Phelps also did say that he really has no ill will toward Michael Jordan. He says he likes Michael a lot and wishes that they weren't in this position, which I don't think 2311 wanted to ever be part of this position or Front Row. But I think they got put in this position when it comes to the antitrust side of things. Now, going through the situation, obviously, we've read both sides of the things. It's kind of becoming busy work at this point. 2311 and Front Row, they presented their side of things, and I think some of the things they say, it's like, yeah, they're absolutely got a point when it comes to that kind of stuff. And then NASCAR, they come out with the response, and NASCAR does bring up some interesting points, like them saying they're going to compete as open teams next year publicly. I think that could hurt 2311 Racing and Front Row when it comes to the injunction stuff. That could definitely hurt them when it comes to being granted that injunction for next year. I do think that will hurt them a little bit, but not all the way through. But the other thing we need to kind of talk about is if this injunction is granted, they will get to keep their charters for next year, and probably they'll be able to get approved those third charters. Remember, 2311 and Front Row are 2 of the teams that are expected to pick up the Stewart-Haas Racing charters for 2025. It's expected that Riley Herbst most likely will join 2311 Racing in the NASCAR Cup Series next year. They're going to talk about guys like Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, all those kind of people coming to be part of the team. Even Corey Heim too at one point. But Riley Herbst is a likely driver part of the third team. And Front Row Motorsports is also expected to be a 3-car team next year, and we do believe that next year it is going to end up being Zane Smith being the driver for that organization next year. Zane has a previous working relationship with Front Row Motorsports in the NASCAR Cup Series a couple times and also in the Truck Series. He wants to be part of that team once again next year. But again, if they don't get that injunction and granted, they probably will lose all their charters going into next year. And I think there's all those two people said that RFK could pick up one of the charters. I don't think they're going to do that. Yes, they're going to expand to a 3-car team next year with Ryan Preece being the driver. That kind of got confirmed by officials this week. But I don't think that they're going to get it because of the injunction or the lawsuit going on at the moment. At this point, I don't really know how this is going to play out. I think all this stuff is very interesting. I think that if the teams do win the preliminary injunction, I do think that they will be able to continue the lawsuit long term, because I think regardless of how all this stuff plays out, I think it's going to be a very, very long time before this lawsuit's done. It probably will be a couple years. The earliest I project this lawsuit could get done is 2026. This is going to be one of the biggest stories going into 2025. If they get that injunction granted and they're able to get it granted for next year, this will tell them that they have a little bit of a case. And I think, like I said, it's going to be very interesting to see how things play out when it comes to the injunction, because that's the next step going forward, which I think is going to overshadow the championship week, unfortunately. But honestly, with championship, we got to think anybody cares about it at this point for the most part. Look at the ratings. I think a lot of people really, really care about what's going to happen in regards to this injunction. To me, it's going to be very interesting to see how things kind of play out. It's interesting that 2311 Front Row have responded to this situation. We do know NASCAR is likely going to revoke the charters if the injunction isn't granted. We'll just have to wait and see if that injunction is granted, but I do think there's a good chance it could happen. We'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that and what happens when it comes to the injunction going forward, in my opinion. The next time we're probably going to update on this story is if the injunction gets granted, which will be granted. If it is granted, it'll be granted sometime later next week. So, that is going to be your today's NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me to Facebook and Instagram and support my Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. You think 2311 and Front Row will get their injunction granted? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what thoughts about Bubba Wallace having a new crew chief for 2025? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, see reactions to NASCAR Xfinity Series qualifying for Martinsville, and we also will, of course, have reactions to the Truck Series race from Martinsville as well. Then on Saturday, we have reactions to Cup Series qualifying. We'll also have reactions to the Xfinity Series race and a Shane Van Gisbergen video dropping as well. And if any major news breaks throughout the rest of the week, we'll discuss it here live on the channel. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.